That's okay. Cool. Hi, I'm Nevin. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, like I said, if anyone's been here, can you raise your hand? Cool. Welcome back. A lot of folks, I'm relatively new at the gallery space, so if you haven't been here in the last couple months, you probably haven't met me before. Yeah, like I said, I'm Nevin Morell. I'm one of the event hosts here. I am a settler on these lands and also a relative of the Red River Métis. And yeah, I'm here tonight to administer the space, basically set the boundaries, make sure everyone's feeling comfortable, and that you get to know what we're about. So those of you that have been here has probably heard part of this spiel before, but for those of you that haven't been here, Massy Art Society is a nonprofit art society, and it's Indigenous owned and led. Our mandate is to uplift over-excluded and Indigenous artists and creatives, and what we mean by that is allowing space for our community to express their joy and their grief and share learning and build more relationships with each other. And as my colleague Brandon has said, so those of you who have seen Brandon speak before would know, offer a story counter to the story of Canada. So usually I do these openings and I am asked to give a land acknowledgement, and I try to make them different every time because I don't want it to be a footnote to the event. I've been feeling particularly heavy this week. As you may know, the 30th is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I know that everyone's going to approach that day and the meaning or the connotation of those words differently, with a different positionality, whether it's a day that you are mourning, a day that you are questioning your own position on the lands that you're on, a day that you feel guilt or grief or are inspired to educate yourself or be more educated. I know that there's like a whole spectrum of emotions that I can't hope to capture in this conversation, or this one-sided conversation that I'm having with you right now. But I hope that when you come into this space tonight, and anytime you come into this space afterwards, you have those, we can hold that for you, as a community. We can hope to build spaces for us to actually forward. In Massy, we always say we're committed to land-back-based futures. Futures where Indigenous sovereignty is not only recognized, but also respected and lived fully on these lands. Like I said, I'm a settler on this land, so for me, that looks like earning the term accomplice. So when I say that we are on the unceded, stolen, occupied territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, I'm recognizing that I am an occupying force, and that I am not being asked to leave necessarily, but that I have a lot of responsibilities given the fact that these are not my homelands. And so, again, recognizing that everyone's coming from a different space, I'm not going to do that perfectly. I don't expect you all tonight to come away and do whatever it is that you're doing perfectly, but I'm hoping that as a community, we try and we question ourselves. And for those of you that are MST or Indigenous and living in a different relationship to this land, I can't speak to that either, but I hope that for you, you feel held in this space as well. If I can do anything tonight, if you have any questions for me, if there's any ways that I can do this land acknowledgement better, if there's things that you think that I missed, please feel free to let me know. I do want to recognize that in this space, we are just steps from Kemalai, which is a traditional harvesting village. It was the place of many maple trees. I don't like to talk about it in the past tense. It is the place of many maple trees, even though there are many less now. I don't have the authority to speak on that history any further, but again, I encourage you, if you don't already know the history of where you live and the spaces you occupy, to look into that and to maybe try to make a different relationship with that space if you can. Not necessarily, again, can't speak to your experience, but With that, and these heavy notes tonight, I hope that if there are conversations that come out of this as well, that we can hold each other with kindness and trust. Okay, with that, welcome to Massy Arts. We are in the old Mingwo building as well. Did anyone come here when it was Mingwo? Yeah, right, the cooking store. And before that, I actually learned recently that it was the hardware store in Chinatown. We have been lucky enough to be in this space since 2020. And I think that that is another part of the history of this physical space. These floors have seen a lot of feet. And I want to think about that as well as we're here tonight. And that we're also in the downtown east side in Chinatown. We have a lot of neighbors that you may see struggling with the effects of colonialism very intimately. With that, as a safety note, I want you to know that I am naloxone trained and prepared to administer. So if any of you folks in the building tonight, or if you encounter anyone on the way home and you don't have access to that life-saving drug, you're welcome to come back. I'm happy to help. That's part of what I'm here for. A couple other access notes. We have a single stall bathroom. Unfortunately, we don't have a push button door. If you need any assistance tonight opening that door, feel free to ask us or any community members that you see. We do have a guardrail next to the bathroom. We have hand sanitizer, also if you need it, extra masks, snacks, and water. Again, if there are any questions, I'll be right up at that desk. Just want to ask really quickly if you folks are ready to start the event tonight. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for listening. Welcome again. I would like to introduce our two speakers for tonight. So, Chef Robin Kort is a Pacific Northwest chef, forager, sommelier, and owner of Swallow Tail Culinary Adventures. She harvests and cooks between the mountains and the ocean near Vancouver, BC, and has been featured on the Food Network, ItteQ Japan, the CBC, the Huffington Post, Conde Nast Traveller, and in the Globe and Mail. Our moderator, Lori Snyder, is an Indigenous Métis herbalist and educator. She works on co-creating insightful dialogues in community, remediating and reconciling with our Indigenous plants as we introduce them into our urban landscapes. She also promotes access to local Indigenous foods and medicines, which supports collective resilience and deep ecological healing for all species. I'm so excited to be here tonight, and hope you are too. Welcome.
Can everyone hear me okay? Not using a mic? If at any point you can't hear us, just yell. I like to have an open dialogue any time that I'm either teaching or just speaking. So feel free to just raise your hand if you have any questions, because we want to talk to you guys. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much, Nevin. That was really beautiful, and the conversation and the reflection of where we're living and how we can move ourselves forward in relationship, and not just with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, but really with all that exist, all of the native creatures and birds and such that have always been here. Super grateful to get to sit with my beautiful sister here, Robin, and to share this book. Have you had a chance to look at it? Anybody? It's really, really amazing. I just read it again today, so I could have some questions and some thoughts while we sit here together. And really, we invite you to have the conversation with us. So as we're chatting, and please, if there's something you want to add or ask a question, that would be really great. So I wrote some notes down because that's always helpful for me. And I guess to start with is, oh, you're just taking it out of the way. Okay, good. Awesome. We both have very strong voices, so super grateful for my strong voice. So just kind of going through the book, right? There was something that caught my eye at the very beginning, and you were talking about a good rule of thumb, and you were referring to spend time with the plants or with the fungi. that it wasn't just, I just go out, I get my book and off I go. Do you want to speak to that a little?
Yeah, I mean, with my own journey with, I grew up in Vancouver, so my mom's here, she can attest to that. And yeah, I think, when I'm thinking about, as a chef, when I'm thinking about food and my environment, I'll go for a hike. And you see lots of different plants, some of them introduced to the area, some of them that have been here, for thousands of years. There's all these different creatures out there that you start developing relationships with. And for me, it's like I'm not a biologist, I'm not a mycologist, I'm just a curious eater, basically. And so I would find a few new plants or a few new mushrooms and sort of add them to what I knew about each year. And that doesn't mean I'm eating them, that just means that I'm getting to know them. I'm slowly sort of meeting one, getting to know its name, getting to know its cousins and partners and the things that are around it. Did I lose the thread of that?
No,
question?
it's kind of, what it made me think is the slow food, right? So it's kind of like a slow harvest or a slow foraging or slow gathering, right? That it's not about running in, it's really so much about the relationship, right? And in your dedication, you talked about like committing to a deeper connection, right? And we were just talking about that outside, like what that means, right?
Yeah, and I mean, for example, with, right now it's fall, so mushrooms. I brought some little buddies here to show and tell, and you can come up later and take a closer look at them. These are all growing around us, right? And it's a really exciting sort of time of the year because they start poking their little heads up, and there's thousands of species of fungi. I don't know them all. I don't know all their names, right? And there's new ones to meet each year. So each year I'll go out and, like I said, you'll get to know new ones, but you'll see like your old friends as well, like the matsutake or pine mushroom. And sometimes when you're getting to know them too, you use lots of your different senses. So smell actually is one of the most important things for identifying mushrooms. Like the smells like cinnamon and earth.
Oh my goodness, can we pass it around? Does that work? I smell the earth.
Very earthy mushroom.
Right? Wow, beautiful. Can we do that? And then everybody can have that sense. It's that we were talking about how something I had learned about mushrooms recently, that we can touch them, right? We can sit with them.
Doesn't matter if they're poisonous, toxic, edible, not, some are neither poisonous nor toxic. They just have, a different function in the world. And you can pick up and touch any mushroom. It's about consuming it that causes, or can cause problems if it's poisonous.
Right. And then we were talking about that you can listen to the mushroom, right? I really love that reminder, right, for us to get quiet. Part of our nature is to be still, right?
And exactly, so we were talking about listening to mushrooms, and one of the really cool mushrooms to listen to is called the fluted elfin saddle. And it looks like a zombie hand coming out of the earth. It's sort of grayish and very smooth. Anyone know fluted elfin saddle? Seen it? Yeah, they're neat, right? Have you ever listened to one before?
No, but there's something about them that attracts you to them. I
It
don't know
does.
what it is they give off.
Yeah.
They do. There's something like, wow.
They're like little aliens. So next time you see one, put your ear to it. And it's like Rice Krispies. It's snap, crackle, pop. So it's like this organism is communicating. It's doing its thing. Mushrooms are very similar to humans, actually. They're more related to humans than they are to plants. They have this beautiful exchange with trees, for example. A lot of them have a tie, so that I have to explain a little bit more about mushrooms. So a fungi, the mushroom itself is the fruit of an underground or in substrate organism. So the mycelium of a mushroom are like little roots, and they can tap into tree roots. And what happens then is the trees photosynthesize and bring food to the mushroom, and the mushrooms mine the soil and bring minerals to the plants. So same as us, we take the photosynthesis from the, the energies from the plants, and hopefully we give it back by planting some.
Right. Well, there's a couple things. So plants need minerals. We need minerals. The ocean needs minerals, right? So it's in that understanding that whole ecosystem, how we need to stop mining for minerals, right? Because we're affecting our oceans, right? And one of the things that I was saying with Robin outside is that the ocean is also a garden, right? Like all of the beautiful gifts that we get from the ocean. But just kind of going back about this relationship that you were talking about, this deep relationship and the dedication, it really made me think about the responsibility. Like the forest and the mushrooms are in a relationship and they're reciprocal.
Yep.
And it is generous and it is altruistic. So how we need to cultivate that for ourselves, like they're our teachers.
Yes. But I mean, if you think of some mushrooms are, like honey mushrooms are a type of mushroom that's a parasite. So a little bit more human.
Right.
Where they destroy trees,
Right.
So, you think about that in the cycle of life and death and all that, it's beyond me. It's beyond me to conceive of all that is happening. It's just really, you want to try not to be the parasite, right? I try not to be the parasite. And as a chef that cooks for lots of people, I try to focus my cooking, and in the book as well, on species that are very plentiful, or, and that can be a native plant that's very plentiful, or I don't like even using invasive, right? An introduced species that's very plentiful as well. Blackberry, it's pretty. Burdock, lamb's quarters we were talking about. Sea urchin, super plentiful, native species, but very, very plentiful. And what sea urchins do, we were talking about the sea, and it being a garden. So sea urchins, what they do is eat seaweed. So they'll go along the ocean floor and deforest a lot of the kelp beds. And the kelp beds are like the nurseries for the fish, right? And lots of other organisms. So by using our huge human power, we eat tons of things. So if we can take some of that sea urchin and sort of reduce the population, then some of the kelp beds, like bull kelp, for example, forests, might come back. Is my wish, basically.
And I so love that because it's a reminder we're actually part of the ecosystem. So for it to be healthy and balanced, we play a role in that, right? So we have to be witnessing. We have to be outside, right? And witness what is becoming some overabundant, where it's like, wow, that can be a food for us, or it can be a medicine, right? I so love that, right? And the blackberry, you just mentioned the blackberry. The thing that what I noticed in my journey with the blackberry, I felt like she's like trying to get our attention. She's like, I have these really delicious black berries that are really high in iron and that come and forage because they're free. They're really good for us. And in that relationship, then we need to clip her back, right? So that she's not taking up all of the space, and then we can use those beautiful long stems, vines for weaving. So we're in our relationship with our hands, which help with our mental health issues. So all of a sudden it's like, wow, she's actually maybe guiding us to be outside in the relationship, right?
Yep.
I so love her, right? And she's so delicious. Anybody go out blackberry picking this year?
They're
awesome. Fill up some freezer bags and okay, good, awesome, right? Super high, like I said, in the iron, so super important.
Actually, on the blackberry note,
please,
because whenever I especially blackberry, because it's so prolific, I really try. As a chef, the berries are super tasty, of course, but is there other parts of the plant that can be good for us or that we can use? And one of them that I'm experimenting with is the shoots, the new shoots of blackberries. Has anyone ever nibbled on those?
Yes.
They're cool, right?
Well, I find them really high in tannins.
Yes.
Like they're really
Puckering. Yep. And if you get them really, really young, the really cool part of it for me is they have a really mushroomy, sorry, not mushrooms, aftertaste.
right.
So sauteing them in a little bit of sesame with just salt, cracked pepper, whatever, it dumbs down the tannins.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
early spring, try these. You know, that's the part of cooking that I love is the experimentation and the, you know, working on that relationship, and you know that it's not just about one part. It's about thinking about the root, the leaf, the flower, and the whole thing. Because some plants have parts that aren't good for us, and that parts that are, like elderberry, right? Where the stems and the roots and leaves are bad for you, and the berries and the flowers can be good for you if treated properly. Cooked. Yeah.
And you can make tea from the blackberry leaf,
Oh,
right?
cool, yeah.
It tastes like roses, right? So it's really quite lovely. And that's been one of the things for me is how do I get off my plastics? And box teas have a lot of plastics, right? So thinking who's outside the door that we could be in that relationship with, right?
Oh, they got my name.
Sorry.
All good. It's just water, so that's fine. I loved how you said connecting the dots, the wilderness to the plate, right? So, you know, it's again going back into this deeper connection.
I've made a little ocean in front
Oh.
of me. I was thinking of.
Oh yes. Yeah. Listen, the ocean is a garden. We were talking about this outside as well, and I've been dreaming as I've been walking down by the ocean and seeing how much gunk there is on the ocean floor, how it would be great if we got the freighters out of the harbor. And for me, that's that part about reconciling, right? Or consiling, as I've been taught, because you can't reconcile if you haven't conciled first. Where it's like, how can we be the guardians that we are intrinsically and clean up and regenerate the food, right? Because I feel like we really need to be thinking about the food, right? So I think this book is a really beautiful cookbook for us to be thinking about all of that. How do we bring, you know, our native plants back into our landscape and put them in our garden, or build our fences with Oregon grape. So that was something, I'm kind of all, whatever's coming, right? And I wanted you to maybe speak a little bit about the Oregon grape, because I love that plant, and there's something you discovered through your test kitchen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Anyone tried Oregon grape before, the berry? Yeah. So quite sour, right? So, you know, if you think of citrus, like we use lemon in so many things, in sweet things, in sour things, you know, we lean heavily on citrus, something that's really unsustainable actually, and doesn't come from around here at all, right? So, you know, think about that. So Oregon grape, if there was a zombie apocalypse and you know, now you need to sort of survive out there, Oregon grape is your lemon for your vinaigrette. It's tart, it's magenta in color, so it's quite beautiful. You know, you can use it in icing sort of thing. It turns it pink and it's your lemon, right? There's a seed in it, so you do have to press it, or I usually just zip it in my food processor to sort of get the juice out, and then it's just like lazy, you know, zip, 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 and then squish the juice out. And if you add sugar to it, it tastes like pomegranate juice. It's super good, delicious. So yeah, Oregon grape can be used in tons of different ways. And that tartness, you know, this is a native species and something that we should, in that relationship, be encouraging. Like whenever I find that I have a new friend, the Oregon grape is definitely a friend. I have a backyard, so I'm very privileged to have a backyard, but I plant them in my yard then, right? And, you know, boulevards are great. You know, I know Lori's done tons of work with trying to work with getting more of our native plants into our local, like city urban landscapes. And anywhere you can plant one, right? It's like, then you're giving back. If you're gonna take something from something, then you try to give it back, is the feeling.
And what a gift that we could actually create harvesting corridors here in our urban landscape, right? That is also going to be food and host plants and pollinator plants for all of those other creatures that are also native to this area, right? So I think that's really great. And I was saying to Robin, I took a picture the other day on and put it on Facebook about someone who built a new fence. So the reality of where does that wood come from, and what about us creating hedgerows with Oregon grape, because it's got a really prickly leaf.
No one's getting through that.
Nobody's going to have through that. The birds are going to have a place to hide,
Yeah.
and that beautiful dark, purple berry is high in antioxidants, as you mentioned. The tart, that's your vitamin C, right? So if we don't have citrus coming a long distance, then we can actually start to be in that engagement, right, in that relationship again, and bring back those plants. So I think that would be like so beautiful. So we were talking also, because here we are in a new season, about seasonal eating and how impactful I think that is for our health, right? How do, what did I say here, seasonal eating? A natural, I need my glasses on here. A natural something, it was about the natural rhythms, right? Expressed by wild things, right? So how that might bring our own, what would I say, connection to the earth, right? By eating the wild. And one of the things is like dandelion is wild, right? We were talking about the lamb's quarter. You've got this beautiful recipe for the wild greens cantillone. So, when we're back in the relationship with our own cultural plants, because being of mixed ancestry, these are some of the plants that actually my ancestors were eating.
Yeah. Like plantain, for example, is a good example of something that is around us. I have British roots, for example, and plantain is known as white man's footprint. So it was brought with them as food and medicine, and it stayed along with them. So, and this is a plant that is super successful. It loves urban environments. So it grows prolifically. And one of my favorite things, it's not in the book, so you can make a pesto of the leaf, for example, but you can also, I recently, at a chef's conference, I made all this, the culinary students go out and harvest as many weeds as they could on North Arm Farm in Pemberton. And so they dug up burdock, so they were kind of weeding for the farmers as well as making our lunch. Plantain, purslane, lots of these different sort of what we would call weeds, which just means they're very successful plants. But plantain was really like a surprising one because it's quite fibrous, right? But you saute it and it softens, and it's got this really delicious, almost like kale or something like that, but its own unique flavor. So when you saute that, I put some soy because I was braising the burdock in there as well, and then different herbs, and made this sort of stew of wild things, and then poured it over a whitefish that we'd smoked with alder. And it was like, these are just weeds, but it's like, you can make these amazing meals with.
And you'll get a huge nutritional value from that, right? Because based on the way that they're growing versus the way that we're growing food, I'm not sure what to call it actually, because I don't really classify it as food, but yeah, it's going to feed our bodies, right? It's delicious, like you're describing, right? Because I was going to say, harvest those leaves when they're really small, but to know that it doesn't matter if you're braising them, I think that was the word you said, braising, that you can actually bring out their flavor, right? And kind of break down that structure.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really cool realization. It was sweet.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, whether with the plantain, whether to get them like in spring or when they're younger. So obviously
They're
not.
very tasty when they're younger. So spring is definitely for wild weeds and that sort of thing. It's prime season, but them taste, off in certain seasons. But yeah.
Nevin.
Oh, I actually had a question about the sea urchin from earlier. About the harvesting and like, I don't know if this is a funky question. I just learned in biology in school that the reason why we have so much sea urchin is because we've killed a lot of the otters.
Completely.
And I'm wondering what your relationship with otters is.
I love otters.
Sea urchins, and like if you encounter them or what that
I do.
looks like.
So there's river otters and sea otters. So I have a place on Galliano, and that's where I do my sea urchin harvesting. And I'm very aware there because I harvest seaweed as well. That the bull kelp. So my old neighbor Steve, who's like 80 now, is like, yeah, there used to be just like a sea of bull kelp out here, right? And there's not anymore. And when I look, in winter, the clarity is like 100 foot down. And if I look down the rock cliff, you can see an urchin barren. There's hundreds of urchins down there. And that's completely because of the sea otter and how humans took the fur from the sea otter and, decimated their numbers, right? So there's river otters around, but they don't consume as much as a sea otter would. And I know they're reintroducing sea otters into certain areas, and that's controversial as well. But I think on northern Vancouver Island, there's been some success with that, but they haven't come back to my area. So until they come back, it's like that's where I'm the otter, totally the otter. And I invite anyone who wants to come out and harvest some sea urchin. This is not a class or anything, but I can just there sort of thing. So if you love, and people that have tried sea urchin in let's say a Japanese restaurant and that sort of thing, some people are very much like, ooh, sea urchin, I don't like it. You haven't had it fresh. It needs to be like super, super fresh. And when you get it fresh, it's absolutely delicious. Like the sea urchin butter recipe that I have in there, it's simple. It's just like you have a sea urchin, you take the roe, and you emulsify that, so you blend it, you throw it in the blender with butter at the same temperature. And it'll make, the butter is like, I call it the Parmesan of the sea. It tastes delicious. Sorry.
Did you bring any? Right? It's like, I think that's what we could have been tasting, right?
Sure, I should have done a bread. Now I feel bad.
That sounds amazing. So there's kind of two things that come up for me and looking, through your book and that. One is the bull kelp story about foraging, how to be responsible in that. And then the other is also the to recognize you're taking a life and how that sort of informs us.
Yes, and with the sea urchin, definitely. And as a chef and as a meat eater and a seafood eater, I find that it's important to know what's happening, right? So with sea urchin, that's something that's accessible to people to actually be able to go out, hand harvest, and then kill it. That's what you're doing. You're killing it. I post these videos on YouTube of how to butcher crab and stuff like that, and I get crazy responses. But if you're going to be eating seafood, you want to dispatch things quickly and, as humanely as possible. For example, the crab recipe in my book, I butcher my crab. I don't boil them or steam them because of two things. One, you lose all the flavor of the crab to the water that you're putting the crab into or the lobster into. Another thing is that it's not a great death being boiled alive. So with my crab, I just, if you remove the carapace, you just pull the carapace off basically and break it in half, and that kills it as quickly as possible. And then you're keeping all those juices. You just put a little lemon or white wine and butter and herbs or whatever in a pot, cook it for 15 minutes, and then you've made a sauce at the same time. But it's something that, again, being in relationship with things, if you're going to kill it, or that can be, you look at a sea urchin, but you also look at burdock root, for example. If you pull the root up of a plant, you're killing it, right? So this is something that we do as humans, and it's not necessarily a wrong thing. It's a survival thing, right? So burdock, when you take it out of the earth or whatever, it's an interesting sort of thought. Plants and animals,
Mhm.
you know.
Totally. And just to go with the bull kelp story, right? Because you're talking about it in a part of the book about our responsibility as foragers, right? Like,
Yes.
and how we may actually start that journey and then find out, oops, we shouldn't do it that way. Or, you know, we learn as we go along, and I think we have to be compassionate with ourselves too, but be curious to ask, right? Because you talk about that with the bull kelp, right?
Yeah. So when I was first learning about seaweeds, there's a great marine biologist, Amanda Swiminer, that's in the Sook area of Vancouver Island, and she teaches harvesting classes, and she does all the hand harvesting herself for it. She's amazing. So she's my main teacher for seaweeds. And so I've learned about bull kelp. It's very easy to identify, right? It has the float, it has blades coming off it. It's super distinctive. If you've grown up around here or wandered along the beaches, even not grown up around here, you've seen these crazy looking, they're like whips. I would whip like my dad or whatever as we were going along, and I didn't know you could eat them. And then over time I was like, oh, hey, you know, these are things that you can eat, right? So, you know, I was canoeing along and there was this kelp forest. And it's beautiful. Like, you know, at a low tide, you just see all these ribbons, and they're sort of iridescent. They're very beautiful. And I was like, oh, you know, you're canoeing past, and I was like, oh, amazing, right? So I pulled up a bull kelp and went home and, you know, happily dried and roasted, and oh, this is such a lovely ingredient. And then I was talking to Amanda, and she was like, it's actually illegal. It's the only seaweed that has some laws associated to it. It's illegal to pull bullwhip kelp up from the seafloor because it provides so much habitat for fish. They should have a lot more litigation around seaweed. But anyway, and also, so Amanda also said that with the seaweed kelp, the most sustainable way to harvest seaweed is actually to harvest it off the beach after a storm has washed it up, because then it's pulled it up. You haven't pulled it up.
Yes.
So yeah, when you're looking for seaweeds, you want to find stuff that's in good quality, so it doesn't look too squishy or bruised or like it's rotting or anything like that. If it's in good condition, and it's on the beach, it's fair game. But the other way that you can harvest seaweed, especially bullwhip kelp, is by pruning. So don't pull it up, just take a small piece of it, right? And with bullwhip kelp specifically, the first 30 centimeters of the blade, which is like the leaf of the seaweed, is where all the reproductive structures are. So if you cut past that, then you can be that's the good forager.
Right.
This is learning, you know, and
Right.
like you're saying, like being kind, you're gonna make mistakes and stuff. And I'm happy to, I'm on Instagram at Swallow Tail Tours, so if you have questions, you know, and you're worried about, you know, harvesting anything, I'm happy to answer questions.
It's such to just recognize we're on a journey, and that we really need to find those resources or people who really understand the ecology, so we're not actually doing more harm, right? And I think that's so important. One of my questions for you, Robin, is what's one of your favorite flavors?
Favorite flavors? I mean, like I've said, this foraging thing is still a journey. It will always be a journey for me. So I've known of this one species of mushroom for, you know, about a decade. So I've known it, I've sort of like seen it, I've identified it, I've smelled it. So it's called a blue-green anise mushroom, and it grows in fairy rings. So that's just basically when you see a mushroom ring, it's because the mycelium that is the fungi is growing in a circle, and it's fruiting at the edge of the circle. So as it grows bigger, the circle's gonna get larger and larger each year, basically. So this mushroom is like, when it first grows, it's like blue-green. It's like almost a neon color. It smells like anise. So it's very enticing. Like it's very like it wants you to explore and to pick it, right? So this is like my new inspiration. I haven't eaten it yet because it's one of the mushrooms that has poisonous lookalikes. Right? So it's like, then you gotta be more careful. You know, there's mushrooms that don't have poisonous lookalikes. So like, this is a blue chanterelle. There's nothing really that looks like this. So it's quite easy to identify. Oh yeah. And like this is a hedgehog mushroom. This is the #1 beginner mushroom. So if anyone's interested in starting to harvest mushrooms, you almost, I will never say 100%, can't mess this up. There's nothing that looks like this. That is poisonous. It doesn't have any record of ever causing anyone any problems, and it's delicious. So, but the Clitocybe odora is the blue-green anise mushroom. And it is, there's a mushroom that looks like it. The Clitocybe genus has some ones that are in the like vomiting diarrhea zone. So, but in this relationship, so I rely a lot on Willoughby Arevalo.
Oh,
so,
beautiful.
And he's a mycologist, a local mycologist that also like teaches classes with me and stuff. And I'm sort of like the cook side, and he's like the science side. And so I'll go out with him usually and do like 100% identification, which is what I would recommend for everyone. I'll pass this around too. For this one, you don't need a mycologist. A normal person can identify this in the wild. What's that one called again? Hedgehog mushroom. And notice the little teeth. It doesn't have gills. It's got like little teeth that hang, or fingers that hang down that produce its spores. So that's one that I'm like starting a journey with. That's kind of inspiring. What else? Favorite flavor, you said?
Well, one of my favorite flavors
Yeah.
is the oxeye daisy.
Ooh,
The leaf.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that is like, anybody tried that? Oh, it's like so unique in its flavor, right? And so that's what's so beautiful about us exploring what flavors, how can we expand all of this, right?
What do you do with it?
I just usually put it in a salad, per se, right? You know, just to spice that salad up and to bring out, you know, that, yeah, we're having a new experience.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wrote about, because we're talking about mushrooms here, is how you ended up creating a habitat for the morels to grow. And, you know, it's one of the things that I've been thinking about too, because, you know, we have to go out in the forest and we're, you know, sometimes we're not really sure what we might be stepping on. I had, somebody took me out one time and we were walking on reindeer moss.
Cool.
And I was like, wow, what's reindeer moss? And so I went home and I did some research and I was like, oh my goodness, this thing grows for 200 years.
Oh.
And grows 1 to 2 millimeters, like 1 to 2 millimeters. And I was like, wow. So it all, you know, it really made me think sometimes too about how we can create the habitat, like you did, not maybe intentionally, for the morels to come up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so around my cabin, we were building a cabin basically, and we're doing a lot of chainsawing, and so we built this platform, and then around the edge of the platform was so cool. It was there because it took us forever to build this stupid thing. It was there for about 6 months. So the rains came in spring, and then in May when the morel mushrooms come up, a fruiting of morels happened exactly around the edge of the platform that we had built. So it was all these black, beautiful black mushrooms that are delicious. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a gift, right?
Right, totally,
And they've
absolutely.
never come back again. No, they're just like, whoa. Okay, now they're
Because they need that food, right?
Yes.
They need that rotting or some kind of
Yes.
stimulation, right, for them.
And I tried to like put
Right.
more stuff
Oh,
in. They're
no.
just like, nah.
Now they said just
No.
at one time. Wow, beautiful. One of the things that I just also want to comment is the photography in this book and also the drawings. I mean, really, it is such a beautiful book. And, you know, look at, I opened it to thimbleberry scones. Like really, this is one of my favorite, absolute all-time favorite berries, right? So thinking about who are, again, those native plants that we can be adding in our landscape and creating harvesting corridors and, you know, on the edges of parks and schoolyards and such, I think is really, really, you know, a good, showing that we're a good guest
Yes.
right? And I also loved when you talked about finding the bull kelp on the beach. It's like what Robin Kort talks about, right? What is being given versus what are we taking, right? So if we can be patient sometimes. I also find if I'm asking, like, I'm like, oh, hawthorn berries are out right now. I'd love some hawthorn berries. And then all of a sudden I come and I find a couple trees with hawthorn berries, and the wind has been, and there they are, gifted to us,
That's
right?
amazing. Yep.
Right? So, that being said, what else did I want to share with you? Everybody's doing okay? Oh, great.
I was going to ask a question.
Yes, please.
So you've mentioned a bit about where you do some of your foraging or kind of research, but yeah, I was just wondering, like, where, if you could expand on that. I, in the last year, moved from kind of like more rural area to the city, and so I'm really familiarizing myself with more of the native plants that I'm not familiar with. And,
Yep.
and so yeah, just wondering if you
Sure.
could speak to that.
I mean, same as the seasons, it's sort of like, which friend are you looking to make?
Yeah.
Like with mushrooms, for example, there's different, we teach classes on mushrooms, and so I have a Whistler class, and a Maple Ridge class, and a North Shore class, right? So it's actually cool teaching every year for like more than a decade, because you go back to the same spot over and over and over again to see if your friends are there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, there was no friends. Like, it was the worst mushroom season.
Wow.
It was like, the mushrooms were just like, no, there's just not the right conditions for me. I'm going to sleep, and I'll come next year, maybe, if you're lucky, right? This year seems better. But yeah, in Whistler, you're going to find more things like the Matsutake here. You're not going to find this on the North Shore Mountains. And that's because, with mushrooms, they have certain planty partners. So they need certain types of trees frequently to grow. So Douglas fir is a wonderful tree to get to know for mushrooms specifically. And there's tons of Douglas fir, right? We have coastal Douglas fir and interior Douglas fir, so there's different groupings of that. But do you know how to identify Douglas fir?
I don't.
So do that.
Yeah.
Start with that. Like, start to get to know just the general environment with that. It's like a grandfather tree, right? It's like, Douglas fir is just a super important thing to our local environment. And it has a lot of those mycorrhizal or symbiotic relationships with a lot of edibles. So chanterelles are friends with Douglas fir. Pine mushrooms are as well. But this, I find them more in higher elevation. So that's Whistler. I'm going to go to Whistler for this zone. You can go to other areas as well, but that's just one spot. The chanterelles, the Sunshine Coast, that's really good for them. Like, areas where there's a good amount of topsoil. So like, for example, on Galiana where I am, it's actually, there's lots of Douglas fir, but there's not a huge amount of chanterelles where I am, because it's all rock, right? There's so many components, really. But yeah, specifically for mushrooms, like this is a chicken of the woods, for example, right? And so you've picked those before?
I haven't picked them, but that's one that I have learned to identify. Yeah.
Because they're distinctive, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You almost can't mess them up. But yeah, these grow saprophytically, so they grow on dead wood, and there's 2 different species in our area. Some that grow on hardwood, and some that are conifer lovers. Those are 2 different species. And just so you know, so chicken of the woods is an edible mushroom, but it's like some people get stomach upsets with it. So, with wild things, wild plants, wild fungi, wild seaweed, whatever, my my rule is to get to know something very slowly, right? So when I've identified something, so this, I'm like 100% this is chicken of the woods, it's growing in the correct environment, it's the right habitat, it looks exactly like it's supposed to, and then I'm like, okay, cool. Then what I do is a small fry test, so I take a small dime-sized piece, I cook it quite well, and I eat it. Same with plants, I'll eat a small piece first. Like, how is my system, is the relationship, does this want to be food for me, right?
Oh, I love that. Does this want to be food for me?
Yeah, it might not. So Yeah, I mean, that, again, you could email me if you're looking for something specific.
Yeah, no, I just, because it is so, kind of like.
New.
Well, and just because foraging or looking at local plants is so area specific, I was just interested
Yeah.
in where you do, where you do your.
Galliano, a lot
Yeah.
of Galliano. Like, you know, I'll give you, so before you leave tonight, I want you to try, if you want, some roasted seaweed. So this is popweed. It's also called bladderwhack or rock kelp. And I've just simply roasted it. And it's really plentiful. So this you find everywhere, coastally, anywhere there's rocks, you're gonna find this. So it's like you don't have to look hard even. And yeah, you can try it. But another really good tip is to just use iNaturalist.
Yes, I have
Right?
it, yeah.
So if you don't know what iNaturalist is, the app, it's just a citizen science database of plants and stuff all across the world. So you can type in something you're looking for, sea urchin, whatever, and it'll show you if it's in your area, right? So when something is new to me, let's say I'm looking for Clitocybe odora or like, you know, blue-green anise mushroom, I'll type that in and see where people are finding it. And then I can go into its living room basically and like see if it's around, right?
I use the opposite function. You can take photos and it can help you identify what you're looking at. And you say like, I'm looking at a berry or I'm looking at the flower or the leaf of the plant.
It's an awesome thing.
Sorry to ask another question, but when you say you're harvesting specifically in these areas over and over again, I'm wondering how, or if you've encountered times where you've I'm trying to phrase this quickly, like navigating relationships with other people who have that relationship. So whether that be like First Nations folks or like asking for permission in that way.
Yep.
You could speak to that at all.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So this is a really, really complicated issue. Is like, where can you, not even just legally, but where can you feel good harvesting, right? So, you know, with myself, when I'm going into a new area, let's say, so for example, my mom and, you know, I have a lot of family in the Okanagan. And so when I go out there for mushroom foraging, for example, in May, I was looking for morels specifically in a new spot. So what I do is I usually go online and there's a really good search database for which indigenous groups belong to a certain area. So I'll do a little search to see who's in the neighborhood, right? And then just go to their websites and actually just see if they have any policies around harvesting. So for example, in the Elephant Hill area in the Okanagan, there's an indigenous group that will actually issue permits to you to harvest on their land, right?
Beautiful.
It's amazing. So sometimes that relationship is actually there and is encouraged, and sometimes it isn't, right? And morels is another one where it's like, it comes after a forest fire frequently. So morels come up the year after a forest fire. But a lot of the times, those forest fires have decimated communities. So like, you know, be very mindful of going into areas like that after tragedy. So I mean, those are just two sort of examples, but you know, really doing some research, being mindful of who's around, and then also, you know, just having an honorable harvest if you are going to harvest. So not taking too much, because I want to encourage people to have a relationship and to harvest, to establish that relationship so that they can find love in their hearts for natural things, basically. But yeah, besides indigenous groups, under BC law, if you want to go that way, 90% of BC is labeled as crown land, right? Very charged emotional term. So those, under BC law, you're allowed to harvest things like firewood and mushrooms and, you know, berries or whatever, right? So, and that's where a lot of commercial mushroom pickers will go to pick things, regardless of who really owns the land, right?
Right. Because you mentioned something about truffles in the book. You're actually not out there harvesting the truffles, and then you're actually supporting someone who cultivates them, right? So we can really think about that too. Again, you know, how do we want to move ourselves forward? How do we do this responsibly? How do we ask for permission? How do we be good guests? And also, but to recognize that we're guardians too of this amazing planet. And this is also something that's very intrinsic for all of us, right? Because we have cultures all over the planet that have been in this deep relationship. And one of the things that you talked about, Robin, was that when we're out actually on the land or on the water, we're starting to witness. What are we seeing and what are we not seeing? And I think that's one of the things that I've noticed. Just walk, never mind going out into the woods. I'm just walking the lands here, right? I'm walking the beaches here and I'm going, what's missing, right? What am I noticing disappearing? What is not healthy, right? And then thinking about, and that's why I'm super grateful to be here and be a part of this, is that we start that conversation so we find our voices to, you know, to say to our city, to say to our governance, no, we have to stop these practices, in particular putting poison on our earth, right? So there's so many, and I'm grateful for the conversation because there's so many levels and it's never straightforward. There's a complexity, but more than anything, I think it's really about relationship, right? Our reciprocity, our reverence, our respect, and making sure we're moving the seeds, right? We're blowing those seeds around and we're sharing what we know so that we can bring it to ourselves here. So we don't have to go the distance at all. It's here in our backyard, right? So with that being said, what else do I want to, oh, you put in the book harvesting charts, right? Like, this book is just really, it's not just the cookbook. It's got these beautiful stories, some beautiful illustrations and photographs, but also just our love of eating, right? That, and all of the way that you, through your test kitchens, have been finding comparable, is that the word I'm looking for, flavors with something else that we can really explore, right?
Like the substitution chart?
Yeah. There's a substitution
Just in
chart
case you don't want to
yeah.
forage everything.
Yeah.
Like some stuff, it's like you can't, maybe it's not the right season or
Yeah,
whatever, right?
right.
So there's, you can use parsnip instead of burdock, whatever, right? Like whatever, with the book, I really wanted to make the recipes simple and accessible. So regardless of whether you want to harvest or
Yeah. Like those evergreen cones,
just pass
molluscs,
this around. You just put a little
right? Like,
hand.
it's like, wow, who else can we explore, right?
Yeah,
I'm thinking, wow, that would be a great one to do with the kids,
totally.
right?
So this one, if you haven't seen the book, it's you gather Douglas fir again is a good, tree to know. So the green cones of the Douglas fir or pine, you collect that and you bury them in sugar and you just shove them in a cupboard for about a month and it ferments and sort of sucks all the liquid out of the cones and it makes this syrup that's delicious. Imagine it's akin to maple syrup, but I find like way more aromatic and intense and delicious.
Wow.
And you can make toffee out of the, it's really good.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And the reminder about the Douglas fir, because I just found out the other day, somebody asked me to do a consultation in their garden and they had 4 large Douglas firs. And they said, Lori, these Douglas firs were given out at the Swangard Stadium in Burnaby 70 years ago.
Wow.
And what happened was, I was like, wow, all the Douglas fir in Vancouver are about the same height. So it's that reminder that we can grow the Douglas fir here, that's always been here, and then we'll be able to have these beautiful mushrooms in our vicinity, and we might actually maybe get the Douglas squirrel back, right, that only lives in those forests, and of course there's woodpeckers and countless other birds. So all of a sudden you see how important the conversation really is, that we want to bring this here. Right, we want this to be outside our door.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. How are we doing for time?
Yeah.
Just want to,
Oh
because,
goodness, I haven't been looking.
oh, anybody for time at all? Just so, because we could probably.
Seven, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we eat this?
Oh yeah, you eat it. Yeah. So this is popweed. I've roasted it in the. So I've gathered this from sort of shores near the sea urchin on Galliano. It's again super plentiful. You can eat it raw, but I like it much better when I've dried, sort of sun-dried and then roasted it. It gets a bit more caramelized. And actually, so once I've done that, I'll usually Ziploc pack it. And then just before I'm serving it, I'll throw it that day into the oven just to crisp it up a bit more. But my oven imploded, so I didn't get to crisp it. So it should be crispier. But so imagine it like super crispy. But yeah, it's just a really nice, put that on rice. It's just like a little crunchy, salty hit. There's no salt on that. There's no spices or anything. So you should just get the taste of the actual seaweed. Super good for you. That popweed is also really good for your skin. So if you're at the beach and the little pouches on it of the bladderwrack, if you pop one of them, this aloe vera substance will come out, and that's used in a lot of skincare products. But I'm always like anti-aging, a little bit. It's a mild sunscreen, so this is not 30 SPF, but it's gonna do good things for your skin basically. So it's good for so many different things. And it's like, as a kid, I would go to the beach and I'd just pop all the little, right? Like, it's super fun. But yeah, I didn't have that relationship. So I'm hoping, like, this book is here to hopefully, like, draw you into the water and draw you into the forest and, like, just get you, you don't have to eat or anything, just, like, looking. And, that's one thing I love about, like, mushroom season. It gets you out into the forest in the rain, pouring rain, and you're so excited because there's all these cool things. Like, right now is mushroom season. Like, just go out in the forest. You don't have to take a class with me or anything like that. Just go out there and, like, walk very slowly and look at the ground. And you'll find all these amazing little, like I said, the fluted elfin saddle that's, like, snap, crackle, popping, and, like, the jelly, witch's butter, the orange jelly fungi that's on all the things. And,
can you eat those two that you just mentioned?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
But I will say with the fluted elfin saddle and morels, you have to cook them. So there's certain rules around certain mushrooms. And I'd like to say with all mushrooms that are new to you, as soon as you've 100% identified one as being edible, cook it. The humans aren't really great, our systems aren't great at breaking down mushrooms that are raw. So even button mushrooms in the store, you don't get a lot of the nutritional value from them if you eat them raw. So you really want to cook things. Some mushrooms need to off-gas some substances, so like morels. Like it's funny, you find morels occasionally in grocery stores, but there's no like thing that says you actually have to cook these, otherwise they can make you vomit. It's just like, I don't know why they don't spread that out. But yeah, there's just certain rules with certain types of mushrooms. Any questions about any of the stuff, if you were shy to?
Here we go.
Yeah.
I'm terrified I'm going to kill somebody with my foraging.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm curious, I live locally as well, what are some, like, don't eat this, like, suggestions?
Well, that's the thing is there's, mushrooms are the ones that get the bad rap, right? But really, as far as plants and other organisms, there's a very small amount of things that will do you hospital level damage, right? There's very, very few mushrooms that will do that. If I ran amok in Stanley Park and put everything into my mouth, the worst I would probably get is diarrhea, right?
Okay, that's kind of relieving because I've been buying a lot of books. I have like so many books, and I'm going on hikes, and I've done some forest therapy courses, right? You're trying to like get to know the earth, and I sit for so long.
Yep.
But I'm, in the end, looking and going, are you gonna
Kill me, right?
And yeah.
And that's part of, certain cultures are really fungophobic, are really nature-phobic. And so, the first thing we think of, if you go to the grocery store, it's like peanuts can kill you,
Yeah, that's
right?
true, yeah.
But we're like used to that, oh yeah, peanuts can kill some people, not me. Shellfish can kill people, right? So it's like, why is there this thing about the natural environment? It's because we're not taught. Like there's no, like when I started foraging, there were a few people that were knowledgeable that I just I found. You have to find your teachers basically.
And are there courses locally?
I teach, yeah. I teach mushroom classes and sea foraging classes and lots of things. And Lori does an amazing medicinal and edible plant program coming up on October 21st.
Was that the date? Listen, I just look at my calendar a couple of days before I go, oh, that's what we're doing, then, you know, where do I need to be? The address you gave me was the bookstore, right? So I'm like, where is everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, but we also did filming, right?
Yes.
In 2020.
Online, yeah, there's lots of online classes.
So Robin did some filming of me doing some teaching, so there's some online courses that you can sign into and learn a little bit more about some of those beautiful wild weeds, but also some of our native plants, why we want to have that salal growing with us, superfood for the brain, beautiful berry, you know, delicious. I don't think you did any recipes with the salal in here,
Nope.
but the flowering red currant you talk
Yes.
about, right? The Oregon grape that we mentioned before.
See, I thought berries you couldn't eat.
Which ones?
The berries of the Oregon grape.
Oh,
No,
you
you
can.
can't.
You just,
Fully.
See,
they're,
I read too many things. Some
Right.
things say they're poisonous.
No,
Right.
and it's true. Like there is a lot of conflicting information about specific things, like fiddleheads, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Bracken fern fiddleheads are. Things are controversial. Just like grocery store stuff. It's like don't eat, you know, pork, fat, blah blah blah, chicken skin. Don't eat that. It's bad for you, whatever. Right? There's this jungle of information that you have to get through, right? And in the end, you have to kind of just make those decisions and take the responsibility for yourself. But bracken fern, very good example. So it's a fern that grows locally that is delicious, right? So this is a plant that grows
It's everywhere.
everywhere. And the fiddleheads that come up in spring, they look like an eagle's talon, right? So they're not a coil, they're more like that. And they're super delicious. Again, a rule of, you have to boil them, right? So that is the one thing, because they have carcinogenic components in them, right? So a lot of fiddleheads have different variety of carcinogenic levels in them, right? But the water and the heat neutralizes. For most fiddleheads, 100%. For bracken fern, there's going to be some left over. But grill that chicken skin, that char on it, guess what? That's carcinogenic, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like grain of salt. Don't eat like buckets full of anything. Eat things in sort of moderation. You know, in Korean and Japanese cooking, that's a delicacy. They go out and they pick the bracken fern and they cook it properly. And it's, you know, I was in a little town in Japan and they served this beautiful soup of like wild mushrooms and bracken fern in a dashi broth, and it was just like, it's like heaven, right? And it's like this little thing is not there to hurt me, right? But if you look online, there's like, don't eat this because the Surgeon General says blah blah whatever, right? Like it's hard weaving through the knowledge. But like I said, you just have to get a bunch of people you trust and teachers you trust. Like Lori has been a teacher for me and has really like helped me shape my how I think about the world and, you know, eating in it as an eater. And developing those relationships. So I mean, each teacher will give you different things. And I have like, if anyone is looking for something specific that I'm not familiar with or whatever, a teacher in certain areas, maybe I can forward that to you, you know. I'm at Swallow Tail, so you can just email me and I want to help, you know, people feel more comfortable. Because yeah, it's freaky. And it was freaky for me too when I started. So, you know, learn slowly. Again, like get to know things really slowly, get lots of information on the topic, get to know things for a while, and then, you know, then you can feel confident about eating it when you choose to eat it.
Well, I'm going to be eating some stuff this weekend.
Great, that's awesome. Eat it.
yeah, it's really about changing our mind, right? And trusting that process, and that it's one, you just start with one, right? That we've been walking this for a while, right? And I also learned from you as well, just tonight, about the bracken fern, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, that's good to know. So, you know, it's not like all of a sudden we've got the book and now I can do it all. I'm just gonna start with one, right? And hopefully we're gonna start to really think about seasonal foods more, right? I feel like that somehow affects us because the sun is moving across that sky and that is having an impact on us. So how does the food have an impact on us? And then the other thing that really came to me, and I think that's what's really beautiful about this book here, is that in the teaching, that all of a sudden I was like, how come we're not eating our foods from this land, right? We go traveling somewhere else and we're, having that experience. But where are we going to have this experience, right? Here. And then when we're eating those foods, how does it shape us? How does it maybe take us deeper in the relationship where we really want to protect the waters, right? We really want to stop a black snake from coming across our province. We really want to, be those guardians that are regenerating what has been taken out from this beautiful land that we're calling our home, right? So I think there's a lot for us to, walk towards, and then having some kind of guide, but also some inspiration, right? This is an inspiration for us to think about who is it that we want to be in that relationship with, right? Anyone else for any questions or thoughts this evening?
Hi, Lori. Stephen Long here.
Good to see you.
Haven't seen you since last September, but it really sort of touched not just my mind, but touched my heart when you talked about people going somewhere else to try those foods. Because it struck me, the people living there, they are eating their local foods. And so instead of saying, well, that's the good food because they're eating it, our conversation right now is bringing up, well, the motto is if we look local and our hearts are open to local, then we become accustomed to what's in our own territory. We don't have to go so far. And that, people are teachers and from to traditions. So one of my aunties came from Nova Scotia,